Okay, let's take a look at some of these bond problems here. Suppose that the company issues $800,000 of 6% 20-year bonds issued on January 1st, 2000. We're going to show the journal entry here to issue the bond. We'll make a typical interest payment. That means every 6 months, unless stated otherwise. And we'll pay back the principal, that's the $800,000 at maturity. Assume the bond is issued at par value. That just means no discount, no premium. Okay, in other words, market rates are 6%, just like the coupon rate or the rate stated on the bond is also 6%. Okay, that's what par value means. Okay, so let's take a look here. That means the date that we issued the bond, January 1st, 2000. Okay, we would take in cash. The company is issuing the bond, so we take on this big liability called bond payable, 800,000, and we would accept the cash from investors or one investor for 800,000. There you go. So this is the essence of the deal. We have a liability of 800 grand. Now we also have this asset called cash, a rate of 800 grand. So we're raising money by issuing debt or liability. Make sense? Okay, 6 months later, on June 30th, 2000, we would pay our first bond interest expense. Now, how do we get that number, 24,000? Well, it took 800,000. Remember, it was 6%. So I go 0.06 times 800,000 times time, and the time is half a year. So let's just do the math here real quick. Like 1% is $8,000. So that means 6% would be 6 times 8,000 or 48,000 times half a year. So it comes out to be 24,000. If you do the math, principal times interest, 0.06, times time, 1/2 of a year, would equal $24,000. So I have an interest expense. Expenses go up with a debit. There's my debit. And we have to pay out $24,000 in cash. So this is called debt servicing. The company pays out these cash payments every 6 months. Okay, now 20 years later, be careful with your years. The end of the first year would be December 31st, 2000. So the end of year 2 is 01. So the end of 20 years is actually 2019, not 2020. So be careful. Okay, at the end of 20 years, you would pay back the bond payable, write down this huge liability we had, and the only way to do that is to give up $800,000 in cash. Over those 20 years, we hope we've invested wisely. We hope we've done something with this money that makes more than 6%. Otherwise, this was a bad deal or it was a bad investment. So for the company, the bondholders get their $24,000 every 6 months, including the date of this last payment. So you have to be careful. Make sure that you show the bond payment back or the payment of the principal back separately from the last interest payment. So this would happen every 6 months, including the last 6-month period, which is December 31st, 2019. So you'd have one of these occurring on December 31st, 2019 as well. Okay, why do buyers invest in bonds? If you can't find 6% somewhere else, this is a good investment. If you think the company is solvent and you don't think they're going to go belly up and you'll lose your money, then bonds may not be a bad investment for you. Now here's the question. What's the present value of this bond from the buyer's perspective? We're going to lose use of our 800,000. That's called an opportunity cost. But we do get it back in 20 years. But we got to wait for 20 years. Okay. In exchange for that, we're going to get $24,000 every 6 months for 20 years. That's pretty good. So this interest payment of $24K, that's nice. Okay. So we're going to calculate the value of that. So the net present value of a bond would be net present value of the annuity. That's the $24,000 we get every 6 months. You'd say present value of an annuity. You have to go look up your factor. You'd be looking at table B3 and you look up N equals 40, I equals 3. Now wait, wasn't it 6%? Wasn't it 20 years? Yes, but remember, bonds are calculated, or bond interest is paid every 6 months. So you got to cut the interest rate in half because it's for half a year. And you also have to make sure that it's not 20 periods. It's actually going to be 40 half-year periods, or 40 periods of 6 months each. Okay, so you got to understand here. N became 40, I became 3. So if I was 6, we cut it in half because that's this is 3% every 6 months. Over here, it's going to be 40 periods because it's 20 years, but 2 periods a year. Okay, so you go look this number up from N equals 40, I equals 3, you come up with 23.115. This times this equals $555,000. What was the bond price? It was 800,000. So this is worth over half. Half of the principal payback, or I'm sorry, the principal payback is worth less when you do the calculations than the interest payments that are for the annuity. Okay, at the end of all these 20 years, you're going to get your principal back. So down here, the second calculation here, this one is net present, let's see, net present value equals the amount, that's the 800 grand, times present value of the amount. This one, you go to table B1. Okay, keep in mind, this is compounded semi-annually. So again, whatever I did up here, I'm going to do down here. Take the 6%, cut it in half, because this is going to be compounded semi-annually. So you go I equals 3, not 6. Oh, but N equals 40. So this one was doubled. The interest rate was cut in half because it's calculated every 6 months. The 6% was 6% per year. Okay, so 800,000 times, you go get this factor from table B1, you get 0.30656. This would be equal to 245K. What's 555 plus 245? Guess what? It's exactly 800K. It has to be. Add these two up, you get 800K. There you go. Now, a lot of people are stunned by this. If you were to say you'll get your $800,000 back in 20 years, but that's so far out, it's so long into the future that it's actually worth $245,000 today. What's worth more is the actual interest payments that you're locking in when you invest. The interest payments are worth $555,000. This annuity, which you're going to get 40 payments of 24K each, that's worth more than getting your principal back. Kind of shocking, but the main thing is that you got to understand there's two pieces. The annuity is worth 555K. Getting your principal back 20 years down the road is only worth $245,000 today in today's dollars. Add them up. It equals 800K. It has to. Okay, there you go.